Good day, everybody. It is Calxiyn here, and today we are going to be talking about a theory made by JN Productions, otherwise known as Jeremy, over on Twitter, that I am totally co-signing. I'm really excited to talk about it. It's about Cinder being related to Jacques, and it fits perfectly with a couple videos that I did. So it was about Cinder versus Winter. We did a video on that. It was a paid Patreon video. A patron sort of wrote about like what that fight would be like and all that stuff. And we also discussed Winter and Cinder being foils. Obviously, that was before Cinder and Winter had ever fought each other. Like, it was before the fight and all that stuff. We were speculating before we even knew that it was going to be a thing, basically. And so before I read out what Jeremy says, which I think is also before the Cinder and Winter fight, and give my own thoughts on the theory, remember that you guys should subscribe for more RWBY videos, check out my Patreon to directly support the channel, and follow me over on Twitter, because that tends to be where the RWBY theorizing is happening these days. So, Jeremy says, we know part of Cinder's origins already. She was fucked over by someone in power. She hates being below anyone. She feels deserving of power and high status. And she notably prefers fire as her element of choice. Likely not just because of her semblance works with it, but for other personal reasons. Then it hit me. Who else dual wields a sword like Cinder? Who else has similar hair? Who is from a family of high status? Who has a father of naturally dark hair? Who has a semblance and name centered on ice? Cinder's opposite? Winter. Fucking Winter. Cinder is a half Schnee, the result of an affair Jacques had because he's only with Willow for the Schnee name. Her father of high status cast her aside like trash for being a bastard child, and as for the mom, likely dead per Cinderella inspiration. Not to mention that in the Disney film, who is Cinderella's best friend? A literal mouse-rat named Jacques, called Jacques for short. And Cinder and Neo could have hid anywhere in Atlas with Neo's abilities, but they chose the Schnee Manor of all places. Plus, this puts Weiss and Winter in the role of the stepsisters who oppose Cinderella. And when's the perfect time to reveal all this? Now! We're in Atlas. She's fighting Winter and Weiss is coming to help. And one of the biggest plots of the volume has been Jacques' crimes and focused on the Schnee family, notably the siblings. It's too perfect. Now, obviously, Jeremy wrote his post before the Cinder and Winter fight, but I still think that everything he said is 100% correct, and that fight actually gives us more evidence, and I still think that this could be revealed in Volume 8. There's no reason why it can't, and I think that we are getting very close to Cinder's backstory, and as we already discussed, the foils that we made comparing Cinder and Winter a couple videos ago, like a long time ago, a couple months ago, it all goes perfectly together. So now I'm going to talk about my opinion. I think it's very telling that Cinder says to Winter, you Atlas elites are all the same. You think hoarding power means you'll have it forever, but it just makes the rest of us hungrier, and I refuse to starve. So Cinder clearly has an opinion on Atlas elites here, and I feel like that this has to be based on some sort of personal experience. Like, there is a venom there, and that personal experience could be dealing with Jacques. So could it be possible that the terms of marriage were if Jacques were to cheat and be discovered cheating, it would basically remove him from power? Almost like a prenup. Like, I'm pretty sure that that's a thing that you can do, like, hey, if you're caught cheating, if you're caught, you know, canoodling or anything like that, like, you relinquish your rights and your shares of the Schnee Dust Company. Like, that's a term that I think people can put, like, in their marriage contracts, in their prenups and stuff like that. And so what if Cinder is talking about Jacques there? Like, he wanted power so much and so badly, he cared more about, you know, the company and saving his own skin than a living, breathing child, which would not be out of the ordinary for Jacques, but just so he could hoard the power in the Schnee Dust Company, he abandoned Cinder and made her hungrier, in a sense. You know what I mean? Because again, right, like, she refuses to starve. You think hoarding power will mean you have it forever, and I think that is Jacques' mindset, right? And I think that Jacques could think that, like, hey, as long as I cover up my cheating, as long as I ignore this bastard child and, like, dump her off somewhere, right, like, I'll be fine, like, I can still hoard the power of the Schnee Dust Company, power which shouldn't be Jacques in the first place, right, like, it should be Willow, like, Willow should be running that company, probably, but, you know, and so I feel like that could definitely be a thing, like, that could have been the terms and conditions of marriage, and so we had to get rid of Cinder and Cinder's mom, like, maybe he even killed Cinder's mom. Imagine if Jacques got a hitman and killed Cinder's mother, and then dropped Cinder off somewhere and she was too young to, like, speak out or anything about that. Like, that would be pretty fucked up. Like, what if the mom was like, I'm gonna expose you, Jacques, I'm gonna reveal you, like, if you don't give me, you know, something so me and my child can live, like, you know, like, trying to get him to take responsibility, like, pay child support, basically, and he was like, well, I'll take care of that, and he, like, killed Cinder's mom. That would be pretty fucked up, sis. And I think the contrast of the hair and the dual wielding is amazing. I think that we talked about the dual wielding when we talked about the Cinder versus Winter fight again before it was going to happen, and we also talked about the ice versus fire sort of comparison. But I don't think that I discussed those things in depth. I think it was just more like, hey, they both dual wield, that could be interesting for a fight, but it's like they both have a very similar hairstyle, they're both dual wielding. It's almost like, you know, Cinder decided to do these things on purpose in order to one-up Winter one day. Because remember that Winter was the heir originally. And so, like, you know, maybe Cinder knew somehow that Winter was dual-wielding, and Cinder was like, oh, she dual-wields, I'll dual-wield, bitch. You know what I'm saying? Like, have that sort of attitude, right? And now I want to sort of bring that comparison between the characters' history, right? Cinder is someone who is hungry for power, and Winter is someone who gave up their power, like being an heir to the Schnee Dust Company, to get away from her father and ran away. You know what I mean? Like, Cinder is going towards power. She wants to go towards wanting power, and she wants to go higher in society, whereas, you know, Winter was the heir of the Schnee Dust Company. She could have had anything she wanted, and she gave it all up. Like, that must piss Cinder off to high heaven, right? And I'm pretty sure we talked about that in the foil video, but think about that contrast. Like, think about having everything and then giving it up because you want nothing, in a sense. Like, not that Winter wants nothing, but, like, joining the military isn't necessarily the most glamorous, well-paying thing compared to the Schnee Dust Company, right? Like, Winter had a pretty good situation there from Cinder's perspective. She was one of the most powerful people, being the heir to the Schnee Dust Company, running the Schnee Dust Company. She'd basically be like a like, billionaire, I guess, right? And all that stuff. She'd be in a powerful position as well, not only with the money, but, like, running an entire company, right? While Cinder was left with nothing, and she wants everything, right? And so it's a nice little, like, ooh, like, that's a nice, like, foil. That's a nice contrast. Like, the girl that wants, you know, that had nothing and wants everything, and then the girl that had everything but wants for nothing and, like, abandoned everything, in a sense. And so now I want to talk about semblances, because I think this is the most exciting one, right? And I talked about this in, again, the fighting video, is that Winter has, like, the hereditary Schnee semblance, and we know that Cinder hates people with natural talents. That was something that was in the Knights Chronicle Cinder card and all that stuff. And so Winter and Weiss, like, from her perspective, from Cinder's perspective, didn't really earn their strength, but rather they were born with powerful semblances. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't even a question. They would get it just because they're Schnees. Whereas Cinder, I feel like, had to work really hard for hers to be useful. And I mentioned this in the foil video, and some people took it, like, the wrong way, so I want to, like, clarify. I think that people in Cinder's life would think that Cinder's semblance was bad. And, you know, unlike summoning, it doesn't bring to mind, like, immediate fancy use. Does that make sense? But in reality, Cinder's semblance can be very powerful if used correctly. Like, that's what I was basically saying. I wasn't saying, like, LOL, Cinder's semblance is trash. I was basically saying that other people could think that it's bad compared to something that is obviously good, like being able to summon past Grimm that you kill. You know what I mean? It doesn't necessarily bring to mind. Like, she can basically manipulate glass and sand and, like, heat it up and all that stuff. You know what I mean? Like, she can basically heat up dirt. That is her semblance. Like, that is what she does with it. That doesn't sound the most glamorous, right? And so I feel like that could also be, like, a Cinderella metaphor. Like, Cinderella slept in the cinders and all that stuff. Like, people treated Cinderella like shit, but then she got, you know, to marry the prince in the end because she had, like, you know, she captured his heart and all that stuff with her personality. I don't think that's necessarily how Cinder's gonna go, but you guys understand what I mean. Like, it's the power within. Like, you're unassuming on the outside, but a diamond within situation. Like, that's sort of the theming of Cinderella. And so when you think about it like that, like, Cinder is kind of like that. It looks like she's trash on the outside, but she's powerful on the inside, right? And I agree with this, that they could have chosen to hide anywhere in the Schnee Manor. And, like, you could say, oh, well, maybe they found out Team RWBY and everyone would be there, so they just decided to, like, you know, stick around there, you know what I mean? But, like, they didn't need to stay there. They could have just popped in and left, but they hung out on the grounds, like, for the entire duration of their stay, as long as I know, which I think is pretty weird because, you know, I guess Cinder would be recognized if she was too close to the school, but at the same time, like, Neo could have hung out on campus somewhere and been closer to Ironwood. Like, you think that is where you would want to be. Maybe the Schnee, like, Dust Company, like, or the Schnee Manor or whatever, like, maybe that is the best place. But I don't know. I don't think that it is. I don't think it's the best place for them to stay at Atlas. So I'm like, they chose that on purpose. Why? I think that Cinder wanted to fuck up. Like, I feel like that she wanted to do that totally on purpose, like out of spite or something. I don't know. I just feel like that's very meaningful. I get, like, I'm trying to play devil's advocate. I get the fact, like, oh, well, Team RWBY and everyone was there. That makes sense. The school would be too dangerous, right? Like, Cinder could get recognized at the school. Like, she's less likely. But Cinder was just staying inside anyway. Like, she was just staying in the servant quarters. So what would be the problem with her staying in an empty dorm room and then Neo, like, running around the school? Like, wouldn't that also make sense? Right? And so, I don't know. I feel like there's definitely, like, some big, like, fuck you, I'm hiding in your house, like, type situation there. And this would also explain another thing, okay? Why Cinder went for Weiss. And a lot of people think this Volume 5 moment is really random. I don't know if this would fix it, okay? This would still be, you know, like, I guess it would have to be a hindsight thing, because obviously, like, we didn't know Cinder's backstory by then, so some people may be like, oh, they just made Cinder related to Weiss for a retcon, right? Like, some people may say that, but I think that this would be great. Like, I know that she recognized that Jean was upset, and I feel like she targeted Weiss because, you know, Jean was, I don't know, like, she looked at Weiss and was like, oh, like, it's almost like, you know, starting with all the things you love, right? Like, what Adam did and then attacked Yang. Like, you know, I'm gonna kill everything you love, starting with her. It's almost like, I'm gonna make you upset, John, starting with her, right? Like, it's almost like that same thing. I guess, like, maybe Cinder could see that Jean and, I don't know, I mean, Weiss does not have a thing for Jean, but that, you know, Jean would be very upset if Weiss was targeted for a very similar reason in the Blake and Adam scenario. But here's what I think. What if she targeted Weiss? Because she knows that her and Weiss are related, in that she really hates her, right? And she wanted to do that in that moment. She was like, I can do two things. I can kill Weiss, which is, like, number one, and I can go get the relic, and then I can get RWBY. You know what I'm saying? Like, she had all of those things together. And people always wondered, like, why didn't Cinder take that moment to go after RWBY? But if there are other characters that Cinder could hate more than RWBY, I feel like it would be, like, Winter, Weiss, and now Penny, right? And, like, also, like, Cinder couldn't kill RWBY and all that stuff, so we don't need to talk about that. But, like, that's what, you know, that was the whole thing. That's why she needs Neo to kill RWBY for her and all that nonsense. But that's why I'm like, why did she go after Weiss? Could she have gone after Weiss intentionally, because she knows the truth, but she just never confronted Weiss about it because there was just never a good time. You know what I mean? I feel like there was never a good time, and so now would be a great time to be like, hey, I stabbed your sister because we're family, bitch, and I hate all of you. I don't know. I think that would be interesting. But now that Jacques is in prison, I think Jacques is in prison, maybe Cinder and Neo will break in and just murder him, and that's how we as the audience will discover the truth, because Cinder and Neo will break in and Jacques will be like, oh, Cinder, my daughter, you've come to rescue me, and all that stuff, and Cinder will be like, ha, fat chance, bitch, and then she'll kill him, maybe. Obviously not that, like that, but you guys understand, right? And I don't know exactly where Volume 8 is going right now, because Cinder will probably take a back seat when it comes to Salem. You know, like, Salem will probably take the forefront, but I just think that that's a possibility, that, you know, Jacques will be in jail, and Cinder will be like, da-da-da-da-da, and, like, go in there, and, like, you know, Jacques will be like, let me out of here, please, and, like, all that stuff, like, you're my daughter, we're family, aren't we? And then Cinder will just, like, cover him in gasoline and light him on fire. Just a suggestion. Anyway, I think that this is my favorite theory when it comes to people being related to each other. You know, I really liked the Adam is Jacques' son theory, but I feel like that this is, like, that, but, like, better, you know? To have Cinder be Jacques' daughter and all that stuff. And I feel like this would be my favorite. This would be the most well done. I think that this is true. I just feel it. I feel it in my heart. This one has to be right. You know, and so comment down below. Let me know what you guys think about this theory. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!